A child born into the harsh reality of segregation would one day stand on the national stage, speaking not only for himself, but for millions who felt unheard. The story of Jesse Jackson begins in a divided America at a time when the color of a person's skin could determine where they lived, studied, worked, and even whether their voice mattered in the political system. Born on October 8, 1941, in Greenville, Jackson entered a world where racial barriers were not just social attitudes but deeply embedded laws and customs. The United States during the 1940s and 1950s was still living under the weight of segregation, a system that separated Black and white Americans in schools, transportation, housing, and public life. For many Black families, opportunity was limited, and injustice was a daily reality. Jackson was raised primarily by his mother, Helen Burns, who worked tirelessly to support her son and instill strong values in him. Like many young Black boys growing up in the American South at that time, Jackson experienced discrimination firsthand. These early encounters with inequality left deep impressions on him and helped shape the passion for justice that would later define his life's work. As he grew older, Jackson began to understand that education and leadership could become powerful tools for change. His path eventually led him to North Carolina A&T State University, a historically Black university known for nurturing strong student leaders and activists. It was during his time there that Jackson's voice began to emerge more clearly. College campuses in the early 1960s were becoming centers of political awareness and civil rights activism, and Jackson quickly became involved in discussions and movements demanding equality. Students across the country were organizing sit-ins, protests, and boycotts to challenge segregation, and Jackson was drawn into that growing wave of activism. The energy of the civil rights movement was spreading across America, fueled by courage, faith, and the determination of ordinary people who believed the nation could live up to its promise of freedom and equality. Jackson's experiences as a student helped refine his leadership skills, teaching him how to organize communities, speak publicly, and mobilize people toward a shared goal. It was during this period that he became deeply inspired by one of the most influential leaders of the era, Martin Luther King Jr. King's philosophy of nonviolent resistance and moral courage resonated strongly with Jackson, who saw in the civil rights movement not only a political struggle but also a spiritual mission rooted in justice and human dignity. By the mid-1960s, Jackson had stepped directly into the heart of the movement led by King. He joined the work of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, the organization founded by King to coordinate civil rights campaigns across the country. The SCLC focused on nonviolent protest, community mobilization, and economic pressure to challenge segregation and discrimination. Jackson quickly became a visible and energetic participant in these efforts. His ability to communicate passionately with communities helped him rise within the movement. He helped organize demonstrations, support economic boycotts, and advocate for policies that would expand opportunities for Black Americans. These were tense and dangerous years in the United States. Civil rights activists often faced threats, arrests, and violence simply for demanding equal treatment under the law. Yet the movement continued to grow, driven by the belief that justice required persistence and sacrifice. Jackson was among those who believed the fight had to continue despite the risks. The civil rights movement reached one of its most painful turning points in 1968. Jackson was in Memphis when tragedy struck during the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. King had traveled to Memphis to support striking sanitation workers who were demanding fair wages and safer working conditions. On April 4, 1968, King was shot and killed while standing on the balcony of the Lorraine Motel. The news shocked the world and devastated the movement he had led. For Jackson and many other activists who had worked closely with King, the loss was deeply personal. It was also a moment of uncertainty about the future of the struggle for civil rights. Yet for Jackson, King's death did not signal the end of the mission. Instead, it reinforced his belief that the fight for equality had to continue with even greater determination. In the years that followed, Jackson began building his own platform for social change. In 1971, he founded Operation Push, an organization based in Chicago. The name stood for People United to Save Humanity, and the mission reflected Jackson's belief that progress required both moral conviction and practical action. Operation Push focused on economic empowerment for Black communities, encouraging businesses and institutions to create more opportunities for minority workers and entrepreneurs. Jackson argued that civil rights were not only about legal equality, but also about economic fairness. Without access to jobs, education, and financial resources, many communities would continue to struggle despite the legal victories of the civil rights movement. Operation Push organized campaigns urging corporations to hire more Black employees, support minority-owned businesses, and invest in underserved neighborhoods. The organization also promoted education as a pathway to opportunity, encouraging young people to pursue higher learning and leadership roles. Jackson's activism gradually expanded beyond a single organization. He became known for building coalitions that connected people from different backgrounds who shared similar struggles. This vision eventually led to the creation of the Rainbow Coalition, a political movement designed to unite Americans across racial, economic, and religious lines. The idea behind the coalition was simple but powerful. Communities that were often divided could find strength by working together. Jackson believed that farmers facing financial hardship, factory workers struggling to keep their jobs, and minority communities seeking equal treatment all had common interests that could be addressed through cooperation. The Rainbow Coalition emphasized unity, social justice, and economic opportunity for all. It represented a broader vision of civil rights that extended beyond race alone and focused on fairness across the entire society. By the 1980s, Jackson had become one of the most recognizable political voices in the United States. In 1984, he made the historic decision to run for president. His campaign captured national attention not only because of his message, but also because of what his candidacy represented. For much of American history, the idea of a Black presidential candidate competing seriously in a major party primary had seemed impossible. Jackson's campaign challenged that assumption. He spoke about economic justice, voting rights, education, and international peace, connecting with voters who felt left out of the political conversation. Although he did not win the Democratic nomination that year, the campaign demonstrated that a diverse coalition of voters could rally behind a platform focused on fairness and inclusion. Jackson returned to the presidential race in the 1988 United States presidential election, and this time his campaign achieved even greater momentum. He became the first African-American candidate to win several state primaries in a major party contest. His victories showed that his message resonated with a broad group of Americans who wanted to see a more inclusive political system. The campaign emphasized social justice, economic equality, and expanded voting rights, while also calling for peaceful international diplomacy during a time when global tensions still shaped American foreign policy. Jackson ultimately did not secure the Democratic nomination, but his campaign significantly expanded the political influence of African Americans and other minority groups within the national conversation. Many analysts later noted that his efforts helped pave the way for future candidates of diverse backgrounds to compete at the highest levels of American politics. Even beyond electoral politics, Jackson continued to play a significant role as a minister and global advocate for human rights. As an ordained Baptist minister, he viewed activism as closely connected to faith. His work often blended spiritual messages with calls for social responsibility. Over time, his organizations evolved into the Rainbow Push Coalition, which combined the missions of Operation Push and the Rainbow Coalition into a single platform. Through this coalition, Jackson continued advocating for civil rights, education reform, fair economic policies, and equal opportunity. He also became involved in international diplomacy, sometimes acting as an unofficial negotiator in sensitive situations. In several cases, he helped secure the release of hostages or political prisoners by opening communication between governments and individuals who were otherwise isolated from diplomatic channels. These efforts strengthened his reputation as a figure willing to use his influence to pursue peaceful solutions and humanitarian goals. Over the decades, Jackson's impact has been measured not only by the campaigns he led but also by the doors he helped open for others. His work expanded political opportunities for African Americans and other marginalized groups who had long been excluded from positions of power. By building coalitions across racial and economic lines, he demonstrated that social change often requires unity among communities that may not initially see their struggles as connected. Many observers believe that his campaigns and activism helped create an environment in which leaders like Barack Obama could later rise to national leadership. Jackson's legacy reflects the continuation of the civil rights movement beyond the era of Martin Luther King Jr., showing that the pursuit of justice is an ongoing process rather than a single moment in history. Today, Jesse Jackson remains one of the most recognizable figures in modern civil rights history. His journey from a segregated Southern childhood to the national political stage reflects a broader story about resilience, faith, and determination. Through activism, ministry, and political engagement, he dedicated his life to expanding opportunities and raising awareness about injustice. His work reminds many Americans that progress often begins with individuals who are willing to challenge systems that seem unchangeable. The lessons from his life continue to echo in conversations about equality, democracy, and the responsibilities of leadership. And as new generations examine the long struggle for civil rights, the story of Jesse Jackson stands as a powerful reminder that one voice, when guided by conviction and supported by community, can help shape the direction of a nation. If you want to see more in-depth stories like this, remember to hit the subscribe button so you never miss future uploads.